All right, welcome back to part 2 of the 8th grade science STAAR reference materials hack. We've turned over our paper. We have lots of blank space given to us that we can brain dump tons of information on. So what we're going to do is first draw our formula triangles. The first one is a density triangle, so we're going to make sure that we have the density, the mass, and the volume in the correct place. So I'll do that for you now. And we'll move on down to the average speed triangle. This is going to be average speed equals total distance divided by total time. And then we also have the net force, which is mass times acceleration, also Newton's second law. So off to the left here, or to the right, whatever you want to do, I'm going to write Newton's second law, just to put it in my memory. Or just write second law and maybe just fine. And then for the work formula, we're going to draw our triangle as well. And I'll show you how to work these triangles in just 1 second. You got work on top, then force times distance below. All right, so in order to work these problems, you're going to have to find an answer for it. So let's look at the density problem. If they're asking you to solve for density, what I'm going to do is cover up what they're asking me to solve for. So I'll cover up density, and what you're left with is a mass over volume. So you'll take mass divided by volume. If they're asking me to solve for volume, I'll cover up volume, and I would do mass divided by density. And if they're asking me to solve for mass, I would take my finger or thumb and put it over the mass, and now you have a division problem. Density density times volume is not a division problem, that's a multiplication problem. All right, so that's how you work those formula problems. Next, we are going to go down to the bottom, and you're going to break your sheet up, this blank space here. This is, just ripe for a brain dump. You're going to draw 6 equal size boxes. So a line across the middle, and then break it up into 6 boxes here. And we're going to draw a couple models in each of these boxes to really help us jog our memory when we get to certain questions on the test. The first one we're going to do in the top left-hand corner is a moon phases box. So we're going to draw a moon phase box with the sun on the right. We always teach it with the sun on the right, and I will show you how to switch this thing around in case the sun shows up on the left on the test. So we're going to draw an Earth in the middle, and then we're going to draw 8 little moons in their phases going around the Earth. Starting with the new moon. The new moon is always between the Earth and the sun. And I'm going to be shading these according to how you would see them from Earth. Okay, so this is not from space. We know if I was looking at this from space, only half of it would be lit. This is how you would see it from Earth. So the new moon is between Earth and the sun. Next phase is going to be a waxing crescent. So we'll draw a waxing crescent. The light is coming, it's new and bright on the right, and I'll label that waxing crescent. So the light is getting bigger at this point. The term wax means getting bigger. The next phase we're going to draw is a first quarter moon. And the first quarter moon is, we will see half of the moon lit. Some people like to say half moon. It's not a half moon. This is called a quarter moon. And we'll label that first quarter. As you can see, the white area is getting bigger. The white area is actually the light. All right, next you're going to go with a waxing gibbous. The light is getting bigger. It's getting close to a full moon, but it's still waxing. So everything on the top has been waxing, and we'll label this waxing gibbous. And then finally, when the moon is on the opposite side of the Earth, we now have a full moon. If we're standing on Earth, looking back at the moon, you're going to see that it's totally bright. Okay, so if you can label the full moon and the new moon, you've got really good data points to go fill in everything else. Next, we're going to go to the waning gibbous. So now the light is going to be on the left. Okay, and so it still has a gibbous shape, and we'll label that waning gibbous. As the moon continues to revolve around the Earth, you'll get to the third quarter. Third quarter is the light is on the left. We'll label that third quarter. Oftentimes you'll maybe see this called last quarter. So if that shows up, third quarter, last quarter are interchangeable. And then you can label the final one, which is a waning crescent. This model, if you can draw it by yourself without any help, is going to help you answer any moon phase question that gets thrown at you. I do want to label that the full cycle in the upper right hand corner, I'm going to label the full cycle as about 28 days. I think it's officially 29 and a half, but about a month, right? So from new moon all the way around to new moon again is 28 days. From new moon to full moon, I'm just saying this out loud, the new moon to a full moon would be 2 weeks. A new moon to any one of the quarter moons, so new to first quarter, would be about a week or 7 days. And then from each phase change, from one to the next, is about 3.5 days. If you want to write that information to help you out, that would definitely probably help as well. Okay, this same model will also help us with our tide questions. Anything that comes up on tides, we're going to draw a straight line from the sun, or a dashed line rather, from the sun all the way through the full moon, through the Earth into the full moon. When the Earth and the moon and the sun are all in a line like this, that is called a spring tide. It's an easy way to remember this because spring and straight line, like you see, both start with S. So if you get any kind of question that asks what phase of the moon is it when it's in this position, you'll know, you'll come back to this reference and see that. Now, if you have the sun and the Earth in either of the moons in the first or the third quarter position, where it forms a 90-degree angle, that is called a neap tide. Really cool thing about that is neap and 90 both start with N. So you know that neap tides start with N. They are the first and third quarter, and spring tides are in a straight line, and they are the new and full moon. Okay, so that's our first model. You can do that, man, you are golden. You're going to be really, really proud of yourself once you start getting to these questions on the test. Now, let's go and draw a little quick seasons model in the next box. I'm going to draw the sun in the middle of this. So we're going to draw the seasons now. And I'm going to draw 4 Earths around the sun. These 4 Earths represent the Earth revolving around the sun. It takes 365 days to do so. And we're going to point the axis the same direction in every one of our pictures. So let's, in our case, we're going to point it to the right. This axis points at a 23.5 degree angle. And we're going to draw an equator on each of these Earths. Let's put that right down the middle there. All right. So I'm going to label these seasons according to the northern hemisphere. So we're going to start with when the Earth is pointed, when the northern hemisphere is pointed toward the sun, you are going to be experiencing summer. Okay? It's tilted toward the sun, you're going to be experiencing summer. The opposite is true on the other side. When it's pointing away from the sun, it is the winter. Now, all you have to do is reach back to your elementary school and remember the order of the seasons. We know that they travel in a counterclockwise direction. And so we're going to figure out what comes after summer. After summer, you have to go back to school. It's generally football time, and that happens in the fall. So we're going to label the fall there. After the fall comes winter and the winter break. And then after winter, we're looking forward to seeing the flowers and trees back in bloom, and that is spring. All right. So this takes care of the entire northern hemisphere. If you get any questions about the southern hemisphere, it's just going to be opposite of the season above it. For example, summer would be winter, winter would be summer, spring would be fall, and fall would be spring. I do want to make point of the days. So, for example, in summer, in the northern hemisphere, you have very long days and very short nights. The days are about 15 hours. The nights are roughly 9 hours. Okay, so we'll draw a little arrow just pointing down to that summer. Long days, short nights. I'm going to zoom in just so you can kind of see that a little better. Now if I go over to the winter, if you think about winter, it gets dark really early and you have short days and long nights. So we have basically the opposite of the summer. And then in the fall and the spring, you have essentially equal days and equal night length, 12 and 12, 12 hours each. All right, let's move over to the next box. We're drawing another little model here. We're going to draw our plate boundaries. So we're going to start with our convergent plate boundary. We're going to draw our arrows pointing together. We draw our arrows pointing together and label that convergent. There are 4 main plate boundaries, actually 3 main plate boundaries and a subduction zone. We'll talk about that in just a second. They form mountains. This is mountain building. Most famous mountains in the world, Himalayan mountains, start here. All right, divergent. This is going to be arrows that, or excuse me, let's go to subduction after this. So let's do subduction zone. So this is also a convergent boundary, but this is when one plate, generally an oceanic plate, is more dense than the continental plate above it, and so it subducts under it. So this forms trenches, and it forms volcanoes. So the trenches form right at the subduction zone, and the volcanoes form behind the subduction zone, generally on the continental plate or the less dense plate. Next, you have the divergent plate boundary. These are when arrows are going the opposite way. These can happen on the land, and they can happen in the ocean. If they happen on the land, that's called a rift valley. So it's when the plates are actually splitting apart on land, and it forms a rift valley. If it happens in the ocean, it is called a mid-ocean ridge. And next and last, we have the transform plate boundary. So these are plates that slide by each other. One is going one way, one is going the other way. They can happen left or right, up and down, it doesn't matter. And these form earthquakes generally. Earthquakes, fault lines are known here. The biggest, one of the most famous plate boundaries in the world is the San Andreas Fault out in California. All right. At this point, you've got a massive review sheet for you to go in and be super successful on this test. Believe it or not, this does not take as long as it's taken to do this first time. Once you practice this a couple of times, you'll be absolutely fantastic and just ready to just crush this test. We do have 3 extra boxes, and this is not all the information that will be on the test. These are just the main key points that students struggle with. So I'm going to allow you to choose your next 3 boxes and what you want to put in it, things that you may struggle with. I'm going to give you some ideas of things that you could put in there, but there are a million things that we studied all year long and in 6th and 7th grade that you could put in there as well. So in the bottom left box, I'm going to go and first put in some common vocabulary as it relates to ecosystems and ecology. So let me move my paper here a little better. All right, first thing I want to hit is biotic and abiotic. And what does that mean? Biotic. Bio means life, so it's just living. And then abiotic, the prefix a, not or non, and biotic, non-living. All right. Next, prokaryotic and eukaryotic. So we can just write pro, or you can write out the whole word karyotic. That has no nucleus. Pro, no. They kind of rhyme together. That's the way to remember that. Pro, no. I'm going to write the word nucleus just so I know what. And then eukaryotic, EU, is, the way I remember it, is you. Okay? We are humans, eukaryotic. Anything you can see without the aid of a microscope, generally as a eukaryotic cell. These are much more advanced cells than prokaryotic cells. All right, the next term I'm going to look at, or next set of terms, is autotroph and heterotroph. Autotroph and heterotroph. And autotroph just means they make their own food through photosynthesis. You can just write make your own food. Heterotroph hunts for its food. The way I remember that is heterotroph starts with the H, hunts for food also starts with the H. So this is like humans, all animals, most animals. All right, and then lastly I want to put sexual and asexual. This is a term we haven't heard in a while. Sexual has two parents, and they have a diverse offspring. So think of your parents, and they had you. You are diverse. You look different than them, although you may look similar. You have different DNA, and you're diverse. And then asexual would be one parent with a uniform offspring. Uniform just means the same. Think about potatoes. When a bud of a potato comes out, that potato is going to have the same DNA as the mommy potato. All right. So that's what I like to put in that box. The bottom middle box, I want to put the toughest three body systems. These always trick students up every year, and I just want to make sure that you understand these three. So we're going to go to the body systems. The first one is endocrine system. In the endocrine system, regulates your body through hormones and glands. So endocrine regulates your body's chemistry using hormones and glands. That's a tough one. You just have to commit that one to memory. I don't know any way to remember that. If you do, I'd love to hear about it in class. Integumentary. The integumentary system is just your skin. And what the skin's purpose is, or the function, is to protect your body and to regulate body temperature. And then the last really tough one that you may see is excretory. In excretory, I always think, when I see EX, I always think of exit. And the excretory is removing waste from your body through your kidneys. That's the organ that removes that waste. It filters the blood and it removes the waste. When you go to the restroom, when you go number one, this is, you're using your excretory system. All right, the last box, we're going to list a couple of the tough cell organelles. Ones that may show up that are just tough. You just have to kind of memorize them. One of them would be the mitochondria. The mitochondria is the energy producer. It's also called a powerhouse. The reason we call it a powerhouse is that's where the energy is coming from. The vacuole. Vacuole is found in both plants and animals, although it is much larger in plants because it stores all the water. It stores food as well, but in plants it's a huge place for water to be stored. And so it is a large single vacuole in the plant cell. And then lastly, We have the nucleus. The nucleus is where all the genetic material is stored in the cell. This is where you'll find the DNA, the code. Okay, and then there's one difference between plant and animal cells, actually two that I want to make note of. Plant cells have a cell wall and they have chloroplasts. Chloroplast is where the DNA is, excuse me, I'm back on nucleus. Chloroplast is where photosynthesis happens. All right. You can put whatever you want on these bottom three boxes. These are the ones that I think are the toughest. This by no means is everything that's going to be on the test. This is some of the hardest stuff. You still have galaxies, you still have weather, you still have topographic maps, but that's stuff that you've seen a lot and I feel is a lot more straightforward. You've got Newton's laws, force and motion, which are a lot of problems. So you put what you want in these bottom three boxes. All right, enjoy.